On the 28th of July of 1914, the War for Nothing starts after an incident in Sarajevo. The war ends in a white peace due to a new country that came out of nowhere. People riot in Belgium, northern France, and obviously Russia, due to gaining nothing and having lost family members during the war. Italy collapses as its economy crashed and it was unstable after the war. Alpina was a country from about 2100 that used a time travel machine due to a zombie virus outbreak. It lost most of its technology, but still has its population, buildings, and troops, which is much and tech from about the 2000s. On the 12th of January 1917, France, Austria-Hungary, Germany and Spain declare war on Alpina to get rid of the country because they do not know how it got there. At the start of the World War, the Alpinians were doing horrible. The Germans thought if they captured Zurich, which they thought was the capital because it was unknown, that Alpina would surrender. This is what the Alpinians hoped they'd do, as they have a genius offensive plan for it. Germany encircles Zurich with 70,000 people captured. Alpina launches a massive offensive on its bordering countries, encircling the captured city of Zurich with 650,000 troops captured. Alpina plans to go around the defensive border between Germany and France to capture the troops there. Meanwhile, that happens, civilians in North France and Belgium rise up, bringing Belgium into the war. The speed of the Alpinians outtime the French. As many encirclements are made, France collapses. The Alpinians would split France into four: Northern France, Brittany, Aquitaine, and an Alpine government state. They also invade the Netherlands because, why not? After putting up a small fight, the Netherlands would surrender, making a full front on Germany's western border. Signing an alliance with Portugal and Morocco, Portugal and Morocco declare war on the Allies for some African colonies and lands. Spain would try their best to capture Lisbon, but they fail in the end, and the Alpinians and Portuguese capture Madrid. Spain surrenders, giving up Catalonia and their colonies and bits of the right territory near next to Portugal. Oh yeah, and also France, Netherlands, and Belgium all lose their colonies. Soon, Alpina would look for some more allies. Brazil and Siam would be a good pick. After Brazil would gain the Guyanas and Siam would gain Laos and Cambodia, they would join the war on Alpina's side. China, Denmark, and Sweden would also join the war on Alpina's side. Alpina would promise China Outer Manchukuo. Sweden and Denmark would also declare war on Norway, wanting to rebuild their empire. USA and the Ottomans would join the war on the Allies' side due to wanting to stop Alpina's expansion. Russia would have joined for sure, but they were facing a problem. They were in a civil war, the communists trying to take over, same as Italy. After the war for nothing, Russia was very unstable and the communist leader Lenin would rise up. Many people in Russia would join the communists. Sweden and China would still declare war on Russia. Sweden would occupy Finland and China would occupy Outer Manchukuo. Meanwhile, in Europe, Britain with the USA were planning to land in northern France to recapture it, but all attempts would fail as the Alpinist defense were too good for them. As Germany tries to liberate the Netherlands, rebels in Austria-Hungary would rise up, wanting their freedom. Germany would still go on the offensive, liberating the Netherlands and pushing into Danish territory before getting halted. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary collapses. Even the Polish rebels would get into the action, taking Galicia. Austria-Hungary surrenders and a new peace treaty is signed. What's left of Austria would be annexed by Alpina. Meanwhile, in Russia, after the capturing of St. Petersburg, the Tsarist government collapses. China and the communist rebels would occupy Russia. Even the USA would occupy part of Siberia. In the peace treaty, Alpina gains the western part of Russia and Sweden gains Finland and a new Karelian puppet. China would gain Outer Manchukuo and USA gets parts of Russia while the Baltic states gets their independence, and the rest are the communists. In the world, the only place where the Allies are actually winning in is in Africa. Alpina didn't like this and it would fund many rebels in Africa and the Middle East for them to rise up. The rebels in South Africa, Egypt and Arabia would train good and with the equipment they got from Alpina they were ready to rise up. British troops would be shocked and would be completely pushed out of modern-day South Africa and would struggle in Nigeria and Egypt. Even the Ottomans were struggling as their territory that borders the Red Sea would also be lost. After a while, even Brazil troops would be spotted landing in Angola. British and German troops would be pushed back heavily by the Brazilians, Portuguese and the rebels, but would at least overtake Abyssinia. Not for long though, because the Alpinians, Brazilians, Portuguese and rebels would take back Abyssinia. Oh yeah, also Brazil would invade Paraguay and Uruguay to build a new Brazilian empire. Meanwhile in Europe, the Allies were finally successful and were getting closer and closer to landing on European mainland. They would land in Norway. They would push heavily into Norway and would be successful, planning an invasion of Denmark. Unfortunately, the Alpinians would finally break through the tough German defense. After they would fully take South Germany, Germany surrenders and would be split like France. Allied troops would still heavily push into Norway, even reaching Oslo, where a huge battle would happen. British troops would enter Oslo, being so close to capturing the main part of it. But as Alpinian troops entered the front line, they would be pushed back. If the British would have captured it, they could have made a successful Danish invasion. But that didn't happen and they get pushed out of Norway completely. The Ottoman Empire would also surrender. In Asia, Chinese and Siamese troops would also push the British out of Asia and would capture Burma, Bengal and British Malay and push into India. British would be too weak and too unstable to fight anymore and their empire would collapse after their government got overthrown. They would peace out with the Alpinians and Chinese, also losing all their colonies. Ireland and Canada would also gain their independence, and Alpina would gain Quebec. Soon enough, while planning the landing in the USA, Alpina would finally regain their nuclear technology, including Miami and Washington, D.C. They would land in New York, pushing heavily and capturing major cities on the West Coast while USA couldn't coordinate an offensive. After the Alpinians would reach Texas, the USA would sign their surrender, becoming an Alpinian puppet. The war was over, Alpina coming out victorious. Many countries like the UK would have a civil war. In the UK after the war, there was a civil war, the socialists trying to take over.